everyone. So today we're going to be talking about chapter 8.1, taking a look at radian measure. So this is for our unit on sinusoidal functions and periodic functions. Okay, so let's get started. So a couple of things we talked about in class was that radian measure is just a different way of expressing the size of an angle. So typically we talk about angles in terms of their measurement in degrees. So one of the comments in class was made that it's kind of like comparing Fahrenheit and Celsius. So they both are discussing temperature, just different ways of describing the same thing. So radian measure is just another way of describing the size of an angle. Using radian measure is going to allow us to express angle measurement in much more detail as a real number without any units. So there's no symbols to put at the end. Okay, so a couple of important things to know. We'll take a look at a few benchmarks in a second, but the central angle formed by one complete revolution in a circle is 360 degrees. In radian measure, that's equal to 2 pi. So that's kind of an important number, and that's going to help us determine some of our benchmarks right away. Okay, so the benchmarks that we're going to use, and I should have drawn a circle. So pretend this is a good looking circle. Okay, so if I just break my circle up a little bit, and so that we can look at some measurements here. Okay, so we just said that going around a complete circle is equal to 360 degrees, and that we said is equal to 2 pi. Okay, so remember pi is just a number, and pi is equal to about 3.14159265359, etc., etc. Okay, so we're not going to go that far. I'll probably maybe just use the first 2 decimal points when we're using our estimations. So if a full circle is equal to 2 pi, then that means this point here, so going from this line to here would be pi, right? So if a full circle is 2 pi, then a half a circle would just be pi. So that means that this point here, which we usually say is 90 degrees, would be equal to about half a pi, or pi over 2. And then one more benchmark to go through, and I'll just make this one here. So this measurement here is 270 degrees, and that's going to equal about pi and a half a pi. So in class we talked about how do you convert that, right? And we went over a little bit of review for fractions. So just as an aside for that, we said that if I have 1 1/2, if I want to change that to an improper fraction, that would be 3 over 2. So this angle here, if it's 270 degrees and we said it's pi and a half a pi, we can write that as 3 pi over 2. So 270 degrees is equal to about 3 pi over 2, in radians. Okay, and so those are our 4 benchmarks that we're going to know. And then I also gave one extra one in class, and I said that we're going to pretend that that is about 60 degrees. I know it really doesn't look like 60 degrees, but we said that 60 degrees is equal to 1. Okay, so those are our different benchmarks that we're going to use, and we can use those benchmarks to estimate different angle measurements and convert them into radians. Okay, so we did a couple of examples in class. So the first one we did is estimate the value of 120 degrees in radian measures. So if I draw my circle again, the first thing that I would do with this is show where 120 degrees would be. So I know that this is 90 degrees here. I know this is 180 degrees, so estimating, I would say right about there would be 120 degrees. And remember, these are estimates, so they don't have to be exact or look exact. And so using our benchmarks, I know that there's a few different ways that we can do this. The easiest way is if I know that 60 degrees is equal to 1 in radian measure, then double that would be 120 degrees, and that would equal about 2 in radian measure. And so that would be my estimate for number 1. So I would say that 120 degrees is equal to about 2 in radian measurement. Okay, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says estimate the value of 220 degrees in radian measure. So again, the first thing I would do is kind of draw out where 220 degrees is. So I know that right here would be 270 degrees. So, I don't know, 220 would be maybe about here. Right, so that's going from this line here all the way to here. So 220 degrees. So again, I can use a few of my estimates. So I know that this is pi here. I know that this is pi and a half, or 3 over 2 pi. So a few different ways that we can do this. I think the easiest way is just to say, okay, well, it's not going to be 3 over 2 pi, and I know it's a little bit more than pi, so kind of somewhere in between. So we can do it that way. Let's say, I don't know, so there's 3 over 2 pi and 180 degrees. I would go for, I don't know, about pi and a quarter pi. So pi and then a quarter pi, an extra little bit. So that would be 4 pi. This is going to be 4 pi over 4 plus another quarter. So that's going to be, we'll say 5 pi over 4. And that would be my estimate for this one. Now in class, we had also talked about a couple of equations, and I'll show you those equations in a second. So that we'll go through one more example. Okay, so example number 2, determine which angle is larger, 4 pi or 11, and this again is in radian measurement. So what does 4 pi look like when we're looking at an angle? So 4 pi would look like, well, I know that a full circle going like that is equal to 2 pi. So 4 pi is double that, so it's twice around the circle. So it would be one more time all the way around. So that's what 4 pi would look like, and how do we compare that to 11? Well, remember we said that pi is just a number, right? Pi is equal to 3.14, 0.14, etc., etc. So if I want to know what 4 pi would be, I would just times that by 4. And I know that, well, 4 times 3 is 12, so 4 pi is going to be bigger than 11 because it's going to be bigger than 12. It'll be 12 and a bit, or maybe 13 and a bit. So 4 pi is going to be larger than 11. Okay. And then the 2 equations that we learned in class, so if you wanted to actually find out what those conversions would be, The first equation was if you're going from degrees to radians. And I would probably put this on your cheat sheet for the final exam. So your degrees to radians, what you're going to do is you're going to take your degree, so for example 180 degrees, and you're going to multiply that by pi over 180. Okay, and then if you wanted to go the other way around, convert radians to degrees, what you're going to do is the opposite. You're going to multiply by 180 and then divide by pi. Okay, so those are the two equations that you can use if it's asking you, if a question is asking you to find the actual amounts. Okay, and that was it for looking at radian measure. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to message me on Edmodo or ask me in class. Hope you have a great night. Thanks for watching.